Okay, today's lesson will be on JavaScript functions. To get started, we're going to open up our web browser and open up a few pages to help us out. I'll just do a search here and see what we can come up with. We're going to open up this W3 Schools. This has some wonderful exercises to help you with functions. And we also are going to need our ESLint. Oops, nope, excuse me. Alright, I'm having a little trouble finding JavaScript. There we go. I don't know why I was having so much trouble there. Yeah, that's not the one I want. JSLint.com. Here, JSLint. Okay. So we're going to use JSLint to make sure we're writing good code. We'll use this sort of as a, you can use this sort of as some exercises. We're going to also open up a terminal session. And we're going to put this in here, and that one in here. And we also need our brackets. I'll search for brackets. And we're going to put these on the same screen. So we can see both at the same time here. Now we have a folder called Full Stack. We're going to go into the Full Stack folder. I'm going to make a directory called Functions. And we're going to create a new file called program.js. We'll use this file to run a program with Node. And then in brackets, we'll open that folder so we can see the files I want to. So we have this program.js. Now, JavaScript functions. Functions begin with the word function. Function is a key word. Function doesn't start with a capital F. It's actually a lowercase f. After the word function, there's a space, and then there's the name of the function. Let's create a function called add. And again, this is simply the name of the function. Then after that, we open and close our parentheses. And then we would need a space, and we would open and close our braces. And then this would be the body of the function. To make a simple function, I'm just going to say console.log hello world. So basically, the purpose of this function is to display the words hello world. Now, if I were to save this, and if I were to run this in Node, you can see there's no output. And what you might be thinking is, well, I said console.log here. Why did it not display why did it not display hello world when I said console.log here? Well, the reason is this is a function, and you have to call the function. The V8 engine will come down through reading this code, and it'll see that you defined a function, but you never called it. And so what we'll do is we will call it. We'll go below it, and we'll say add. And we will open and close our parentheses. And this is how you call a function. You use its name and you open and close the parentheses. Now, when I run this, you should see that it will output hello world. So now we've defined a function and we've called the function. Now let's go lint this, make sure we've done a good job here. And you're going to see there's a problem. You see where it says expected use strict before the word console. Now, what this is all about is use strict is a directive for the V8 engine. And what this tells the the JavaScript interpreter to do is to use the strict rules. And the code that we want to write, we want to use the strict rules, because JavaScript is very loose. So now if I were to include that in here, and we're always going to want to. Now I still have another, I guess I copied that wrong, so we'll try that. So now my linting is fine. There's no problems now. Another thing we could do, I'll show you here. You can put this use strict in here. Now in this case, if that's all I did, I would have to include it with each function. This is not in what we call a global scope. If I put use strict at the beginning of the page, it's in what's called global scope, and it will affect the whole file. The interpreter will read this file, and it'll say use strict, and it'll immediately go into strict mode and hold us accountable and make us write good code, basically. And it is always a good thing to use strict. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is, this function is not very useful. What we can do is make it more useful. One of the things that we can do is we can include a parameter. What I can do is I can type the letter X here, and what that is, that sort of is like defining a variable. As you recall, we can define variables like this. Well, when it comes to functions, I can define a variable that can be passed in. I don't need to do this. I can just this is similar to saying this, and there's no value. It'd be undefined at this point, okay? Except the shorthand is just that, just X. So then when I call the function, if you see this, it really wasn't very useful. I called the function, but I didn't pass anything into the function. And in fact, JavaScript doesn't require you to. However, if we were to lint this, it would show, I believe, it would tell us that we have a little problem here. You can see it says unused X. And that's the same message our linter would give us if we defined a variable that we never used. And so we defined a variable here. We should call this function and pass in a variable, pass in a value, excuse me. So I'm going to pass in 5. And then what we can do is, on the inside of this, we can just display that variable. So I'm saying add and pass in a 5. So, and the function is declared as add, and it expects a 5, and then I'm just going to display that on my console. So let's run that real quick. Oops. Okay, so you can see down here, I passed in a 5, and I displayed the 5 from within inside the function. Okay, let's lint this now and see how our linter, see if it's happy. And you can see that our linting is clean. So now we can move on. Just a note, this variable, it's a variable name, and it follows the rules of variable names. And so I could call it toast. And then from the inside, if I'm going to display toast, I need to do this. Now, it can be a string as well. So I'm I'm calling add, and I'm passing in a string, and then I'm simply going to display that string. And sure enough, it's just playing hello world. Another thing I can do is pass in two variables. And so if I were to do just this, my function is defined with two variables, but I don't have to pass in that second one. It doesn't force me to, but it's bad form not to pass in that second variable. And we know that because when we lint this, it's going to say unused jelly. See, I defined a variable here and I'm not using it. Okay, I'm not passing it in, I'm not using it on the inside. We don't want to create variables that we're not using. So we'll just pass something in here. And then we'll display both. We'll just put a space there and say jelly. And that will, let's see what we get on that one here. And so it says hello world, goodbye. And as you remember, when I take two strings and I add them together, actually this is three strings, basically JavaScript will concatenate the strings together, which is what we are seeing here. Hello world and a space and goodbye. And just so, let's try one more thing here. We can say X and Y. We pass those in. And we'll say X plus Y. Now these are numbers. Oops, I'm sorry, I messed up on that one. That is wrong. I'm going to pass in a 5 and a 6. I'm going to pass in a 5 and a 6. And so the 5 comes in as toast. The 6 comes in as jelly. We add toast plus the jelly. We should get 11. Okay, so we get 11. Another idea that we will explore is that you can write this function in lots of ways. The word function comes first, then there's one space, not 2 or 3, but 1. You'll find if you put more than one space there or don't put space there, it certainly won't. It may work, but it's not going to lint. Also, you can put a space here, and JavaScript will run this. It doesn't care that you put that space there. However, we don't want to put a space there. We do not want to do that. Next thing is, we don't want a space here, we don't want a space here, and we don't want a space here. It will work, but you'll see, as you'll see, it will work. It functions just fine. But when we lint it, you can see it complains about these spaces here. And so just because it works doesn't mean it's right. So let's we need to make sure we write good clean code. Now the thing is, there's one space here. It will work if there are no spaces, but again, if we lint this, we're going to see it's going to complain about that space. Expected one space between here. So it wants that space here. So if I lint that with that space, that's the way we write it. We write good code. Another thing, when we call this, when we say add, and we open our parentheses, I'll come down here and see what happens. It functions just fine if we were to put a space there. It functions just fine if we put spaces here. And if we take that space out, it will work, but this is not good code. And you can see that we lint this, it just doesn't, all these spaces are just not correct. So we want no space there, we want a space after that comma, and we don't want that space there. Excuse me. Another thing, this we do not want a space between the semicolon and that closed parenthesis. That'll bark at us. And we don't want any spaces after this either. It's going to unexpected trailing spaces. So we got to do the right thing. This is correct. So let's fix this up. All right, the next idea that we're going to talk about is that I'm going to say 1, 2, excuse me, and we're going to declare another variable. What we can do is we can return a value. So what we're going to do is we're going to say return 1 plus 2. Excuse me, I keep spelling that wrong. The keyword return is a keyword, and what it does, it's going to give us a number back. Some functions take values and do something with those values, and they're done. But we can also make a function take some values, take some parameters, do something with those parameters, and then give us back something. And so by using the keyword return, I'm going to return 1 plus 2. So let's take care of this real quick. I can use, I'm calling add with a 5 and a 6, and so it's going to add 5 and 6 and give it back to me. Now let's go ahead and run this, and you'll see, well, we're not going to get anything. There's no return value because nowhere did I say output this. So the logical place to output this would be to declare another variable and assign the result of adding 5 and 6 to the result here. So what's going to happen is we're calling add, we're just passing in a 5 and a 6, comes into this function, and it's going to return the answer of the first one plus the second one, 1 plus 2. So, but it's going to be 11. Then we're going to say console.log, and we'll log the result. The result holds the answer of 5 plus 6. And that 5 plus 6, or the 11, was returned by this statement right here. So we're calling a function, it's adding two numbers and giving us the answer back, basically. So sure enough, we're back, we got our 11 here. Now another thing we could do is we could just declare x equals 88 and var y equals 99. And we could pass in these variables, x, comma, y. I think we can do just to mix it up, give you some examples here. We can call these x and y too, and we'll say x plus y. In fact, we want our variable names to be meaningful, and so what I'm doing is I'm declaring a variable x and I'm declaring a variable y, and I'm passing the values of those variables in to my function. So I should get the result of 88 plus 99 assigned to result, and I'll display result. We'll save that. And sure enough, it's 187. Now, I'm going to pause for just one moment. Okay, we'll resume now. I'm going to kind of cover an important point here. Cover some things that you really shouldn't do. Let's say that we redefine what x equals. Let's say x is 100 right inside here. We know that we defined a function, and it takes an x and a y, and then we've redefined x to 100. Even though we've passed in something, we're redefining it, and so then we're going to return x plus y. So basically x is now 100, but we're passing in an 88. And you should never do this. This is kind of an example of something that doesn't make sense. But the question is, what is x going to be, and which x are we talking about? When you have two variable names called x, one on the outside of a function, one on the inside of a function, the scoping of the variables becomes important, and you can fool yourself. And I'm going to try to demonstrate something here. We'll just kind of see what happens here. We're going to just kind of console log x. So we'll get the result, and then we will display it, and then we're just going to display what x is. and then we'll kind of see what the consequence of this is. So what you can see is the answer is 199, and so we know that that makes sense because we passed in x and y was 99. We redefined x on the way in as 100. So 100 plus 99 indeed is 199. So, and that kind of makes sense. The next thing is we displayed the x, okay? So, and this is an important concept. We said x is 88, and we passed it into the function, and then we changed its value to 100 on the inside of this function. Because it didn't give us 88 plus 99, it gave us 100 plus 99. And so, but the x on the outside is still 88, okay? So, and this is important for understanding the scoping. X on the outside of that function is still 88, but x on the inside of this function is 100. Okay? And whenever you have function or variables that are on the inside and outside of the function, you kind of need to understand the scope of those functions or those variables. Okay, I'm going to pause for one moment. Okay, the next point we're going to make, we're just going to start over here. Another way to define a function is you can assign it to a variable. You can say variable do it equals function x console.log world. Okay, so this is what's known as an anonymous function. You can see the function doesn't have a name like they normally do. Normally we would say function and the name, do it, and we would open and close our parentheses, something like this. But oftentimes what you'll see are what are called anonymous functions. They have no name. This function is, however, assigned to a variable named doIt. So, in fact, we can call this function by using its variable name, just as if it were the function name. Now we're going to lint this, and you're going to see an important point here. What you're going to see is that x is unused, which we did not pass in a variable, and that was bad. And then the next thing is excuse me. Expect to do it at column 8, not column 0. And what it's barking about is that it expects the semicolon right here. Let's look at that real quick here. When we define a variable, we always put a semicolon at the end, don't we? Just like that. If we didn't put that semicolon, that would be wrong. So we know to do that. Well, when we define this variable doIt and assign a function to it, it's the same thing. We need a semicolon at the end of that line, because this is equivalent to saying this. There really is no difference. So instead of this 5 being here, there's a function. We're assigning a function to a variable. So let's put it back here. So this part from here down is the value that we're assigning to doIt, or to the variable named doIt, and therefore we need to put the semicolon at the end. And what you'll see is if we lint that, sure enough, we got rid of that two of the problems. We still have the problem where we did not pass in a variable. So we'll pass in the variable, and then we'll display it, and you'll see now we should get an answer of 55 down here being displayed out. And if we were to lint that, I think we'll find that our linting is wonderful. There it is. So this is an important concept, this anonymous function. We're going to take this one step farther here. Okay, so this another concept we're going to talk about extending this anonymous function idea is that we can create a function, for example, And let's say it has a variable called let's not do that. Let's call it, I'm just going to pass in some juice. And then we can do something with that juice. What we can do, this variable can be a function. It can be a string, an int, a boolean, and it can also be a function. So what we could do is when we call hello, we can actually pass in the doIt function, just like this. And then from the inside of here, we can call that function. So hello takes a variable named juice. This variable can be string, a boolean, int, a function. It can be just about anything. So if we're expecting a function, we can just call the function. So we've defined an anonymous function here called doIt. So this is a variable that's assigned to a function. We can call hello with and pass in the anonymous function. So juice is a function. We can call the function just like we call any function. We should expect, but one thing is doIt does expect an x. It has a parameter. So we would need to pass in a value here. So basically calling juice is equivalent to calling doIt with 777. So if I run this, I expect to see 777. So you really need to think about what just happened there, because you're going to see this over and over again. And again, this is where we're passing a function as a parameter to another function, and then calling that function from within inside. And with this idea comes some really interesting constructs that you'll see in JavaScript.